This week is my quarterly podcast episode on being an expat in Mexico. I will be discussing the process of how we went about buying a home in Ajijic, Jalisco, Mexico. Cue the music.
Welcome to the Repurpose Your Career podcast, brought to you by Career Pivot. This podcast is where those of us in the second half of life come together to discuss how to repurpose our careers for the 21st century. Come listen to career experts give you proven strategies. Listen to people like you tell their stories on how they repurpose their careers. And finally, get your questions answered. Your host, Mark Miller, has made 6 career pivots over the last 30 years. He understands this is not about jumping out of the frying pan into a fire, but rather to create a plan where you make clear, actionable steps or pivots to a better future career. Are you ready to repurpose your career?
Welcome to episode 254 of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. My name is Mark Miller, and I'll be your host every Monday for what it's like to repurpose your career. This week, I want to take you through the process that we went through in buying a house in Mexico. I want to do a podcast about once a quarter on being an expat. For the first quarter of 2022, this is it. The first thing I want you to understand, the process of purchasing a house is very similar between the United States and Mexico. What you are buying is different. In all my travels around the world in my career, people build houses from materials that are readily available. In the U.S., most houses are built from wood. In Mexico, they are built from brick and concrete. And the brick and concrete is similar to what you find is available in the U.S., but it's different. Therefore, houses in Mexico are built and not architected. I will explain more about that later. Before we go any further, let me mention I have a new sponsor, Magic Mind. Magic Mind is the world's first productivity drink. It is not an energy or a coffee-based drink, but a drink that will help you stay focused. And I've been using it for several months, and it's made a real difference. But more on that later in the show. Let's discuss purchasing a house in Mexico. Again, like I stated, what you are buying is different. So there are few, if any, zoning or building codes, and there are pretty much no mortgages. Houses are built and not architected, and what that means is when they build a house, they typically come in, bring a concrete truck in, pour the foundation, and then they put up 4 exterior walls. And only later will they start figuring out, well, where does electrical and plumbing go? And they will chisel out to make sure to go place that stuff into the walls and into the foundation. For many people, that's going, well, that's not very good. Well, by the way, it works. Unlike in a U.S. home, which is largely made from lumber, it has to be very, very architected and planned out. Here, none of your interior walls are load-bearing. So in much of the cross beams are made from steel, and it's just a very, very different way of doing things. The other thing you have to remember is the liquidity of the markets is quite different. In many parts of Mexico, homes are kept within families, so they don't sell them. The exception of this is in resort communities and in expat communities, where there's likely to be much more housing to be bought and sold. By the way, where I live in Ajijic is both of those. We're a resort community for the Tapatíos, the Guadalajarans, and it also has a significant expat community. So I'll use the example, we have friends in Guanajuato. Guanajuato is an absolutely gorgeous city of about 200,000 people. It's called the City of Stairs. It's an old mining town, a couple of universities. They moved there and they had a hard time finding a property to buy. There's just not very much available, and there are no expats, and it's not a resort, although it is a destination for tourists. If you purchase a property and you need to sell it, one of the things you may have to understand is it may take a while to sell. If you're buying into a community that is either a resort community or has lots of expats, you're probably going to buy a house that is furnished. By the way, all the houses we have rented came furnished. And the house we bought came furnished. And we liked most of the furniture. We didn't like all of it. The other thing is we've been renting for over 3 years in multiple different locations. And that's helped us really determine what we are looking for if we ever wanted to buy a house. And there's a different philosophy here. In the expat community, there are some that want to buy a house. The reason is they want to understand exactly they want to reduce their outflow of money. They don't want to pay $500 or $1,000 a month in rent. They want to know exactly how much money that they need for the entire year. Versus there are others who say, I'm renting, I do not want to be tied down. I want the freedom to be able to, at the end of a year, move someplace else. Maybe I want to go someplace else to go visit for 3 months, 6 months. We have several friends who do exactly that. There's not a right or wrong about whether you buy or rent. We actually didn't think we would ever buy. Last July of 2021, we were coming up. Our condo had been rented for 2.5 years. We were coming up to the end of capital gain exemption period. If we sold the property, you have to be in the property for 2 of the previous 5 years. And we were kind of running to the end of that, so we decided to sell. Our condo in Austin, we got a whole lot more than we expected. But that's a whole different story. And that's when we said, okay, let's start looking. Now, there is, at least here on the North Shore of Lake Chapala, there is a multiple listing service. It's chapalamls.net. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. We had used Access Lake Chapala Real Estate for both of our previous rentals, and we're very happy customers. So I reached back out to them, and Monica was assigned to us, and we just love Monica. And you will find a video in the show notes where we were recorded discussing our experiences with Access Lake Chapala and Monica, and you'll find all of Monica's contact information with the video. We set up a time each week to check out properties for sale. We knew basically what we were looking for. Couple of bedrooms, couple of baths, 2 floors with the bedrooms on the second floor. We wanted a north-south exposures because the lake is to the south, the mountains are to the north, and that is where the wind flow. We preferred that the home came mostly furnished. We wanted a mirador, which is essentially a terrazza on the roof, and we wanted it covered. And we wanted both lake and mountain views. What we got was partial lake and great mountain views. It had to have off-street parking, high-speed internet already installed, and we preferred it to have a pressurized water system. But more on that later. We'll talk about what water is different here than it is in the U.S. And by the way, I will put pictures in the show notes so you can see what we purchased. I also wanted to spend less than half of what the proceeds came from the sale of the condo were. We engaged with Monica very similar to the way you would engage with a realtor in the U.S. She took us out each week. We probably went out for 6 or 8 weeks. We looked at a lot of different houses. It was probably after 6 weeks that she showed us a house that we ended up purchasing. We had looked at a couple others that we really liked, but they required some changes and some remodeling. And this house pretty much ticked off all the boxes. So at that point, we submitted an offer. Now, when you submit an offer, the offer kind of looks like a U.S. kind of offer, except there's no money involved. You submit no money. What you do is you hire an inspector to go inspect the house because you are going to buy it pretty much as is. Monica recommended an inspector. He was very good. He submitted us a report. And by the way, I sent the report to my realtor back in Austin, who was just impressed how thorough it was, but also the lack of legalese, which was interesting because it was probably a fraction of the length of a U.S. Home inspection report just because it doesn't have all the legal language. So after the inspection, I got back, and the inspection was about $250 US. The only thing that really came back was he said, well, the propane tank is probably 20 years old, probably needs to be replaced. And I went back and I asked Monica, and we approached the current owner to say, how about we split the cost of replacing the propane tank? And he agreed. By the way, we were purchasing this from a gentleman who was living in California. He and his partner, and he and his husband had lived in the house for, I believe, 3+ years. Unfortunately, his partner, his husband, passed away from cancer in 2020, and he decided to move back. Now a word from our sponsor, Magic Mind, which I said in the introduction is the world's first productivity drink. I first tried the product when we were driving from Austin back to our home in Ajijic, Mexico last October. It really helped me stay focused on the road. This was very noticeable as it's a tiring 3-day drive, and we've done this 6 or 7 times. I drink Magic Mind with my morning coffee. I actually like the taste and sip on the product while drinking my morning cup of joe. I continue to use the product during my annual content audit while I go through every single piece of content on the Career Pivot website, which there is a lot of, and I will tell you there is a close of 1,000 pieces of content, and I found Magic Mind invaluable in helping me stay focused. As I said, Magic Mind is a productivity drink. It's not an energy or a coffee-based drink, but a drink that will help you stay focused on what you are doing, beat procrastination, and get you into a working flow state. As I said, I drink this with my morning coffee, and after 30 minutes, I'm ready to go to work. If you continue to use this on a daily basis after 5 or 10 days, you will notice you're more productive, stop procrastination, and you will get into a working flow state much easier. There are lots of ways to consume the product, including making a latte, chugging, or sipping it. I like sipping it. I like the taste. Magic Mind works for me, and I believe it'll work for you. I have a 20% discount code for you, and you can go to magicmind.co/repurpose and use the discount code repurpose20. That is www.magicmind.co/repurpose and use the discount code repurpose20. As always, the link in the discount code will be included in the show notes. We submitted the offer, they accepted, and what I did was at that point essentially wire 1/10, a down payment of 1/10 the purchase cost, to my realtor to hold in escrow. So at that point, I started asking around, okay, we're gonna buy this thing. What about homeowners insurance? So I asked my buddy George, he runs our yoga class, and he's been down here over 10 years, says, do you have homeowners insurance? And his response to me was, no. I said, why not? He says, I don't have a single stick of wood in the house, so it's not going to burn down. I'm not in a flood zone, and I don't have anything expensive worth stealing. So no, I'm not going to have homeowners insurance. Then I went to my biking buddy, Jerry, and said, what about you? Do you have homeowners insurance? And he said the exact same thing. On top of that, he said, well, when he closed on his house about 3-4 years ago, at the closing, there were 5 professionals there, and he asked them all, do you have homeowners insurance? And the answer, every last one of them, was no. So he never bought homeowners insurance. He does have a neighbor who has homeowners insurance, and she worries a lot. And homeowners insurance is pretty inexpensive. The only person I know who has homeowners insurance is I've got a biking buddy who's a pilot for Volaris. He's a Mexicana. And he has homeowners insurance. Why? Because he has a mortgage. So there we were. We were going to close in the mid to late October. The week prior to closing, I wired the rest of the money to my real estate agent to hold in escrow. And the interesting one there is I deal all my finances and investments is I am with Wells Fargo Advisors, not Wells Fargo Bank, but the investment side, which I've been with for many years. We have a good friend who deals with Wells Fargo Bank, and she was buying a house a month or two after we did, and she tried to wire money, and Wells Fargo Bank said, nope, you got to come into a branch bank to initiate this. So she had to fly back to California for no other reason than to walk into a branch bank to initiate the wire transfer. Yes, we live in strange times. Right around the closing, there was an inventory done so that there were pictures taken of everything that was in the house so that when we finally did close and took it over, we could check against what was promised to be there. Now, the owner had removed some artwork. These were obviously very sentimental pieces, pictures of his partner. There was one TV set that they removed, and this was all documented very clearly in the inventory. To a large extent, most everything, the house was probably 90% furnished. We closed. The closing was pretty typical. Took about an hour. There was no mortgage involved. Money changed hands and boom, 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 and we were done. I am still waiting for the deed to be registered. I can't transfer the electric service until that happens. We took possession of the house, and at that point, we started doing the things we needed to do. This house comes with a water filter system. Here in Mexico, you do not have pressurized water that comes from the city. Essentially, there is a cistern in my driveway underground that the city delivers water to several times a day. And it's, quote, potable water, drinkable water. It is not. In this house, we have a whole house filtration system that filters the water. I can swap out the filters about every 3 months. So first thing I did was swap out the filters. The next thing we did was order a reverse osmosis system so we can drink, which means we don't drink bottled water anymore. Mexico is one of the biggest consumers of bottled water. You buy bottled water in large 20-liter containers. You swap the bottles back and forth, plastic bottles. Like I said earlier, the city water departments do not provide pressure. That is, it said they deliver water to your home, goes into a cistern, and it's your responsibility to create the pressure for your home. In many cases in Mexico, it goes up to another cistern on the roof, and you have gravity that creates the pressure. In our case, we had a pressurized water system. We had in both of our previous rentals. We wanted that again. So water is a key piece, and I checked to make sure when the cistern had last been cleaned out. So at this point, we had a number of changes we wanted to make. We wanted ceiling fans. We bought some shades for the Mirador. We were going to replace the refrigerator, which took an extended amount of time to find a refrigerator that would fit in our essentially small space. We needed some pictures hung. There was one very large picture that had fallen. And you just don't knock a nail into the wall because these are all concrete walls. I hired Victor, the handyman, who came again from Monica, and he started putting in the ceiling fans. I had all the electrical sockets in the house were on the exterior walls. This is the interesting part. And I went into one of the second bedroom, which is my office where I'm recording this right now. And where I wanted to put my desk, there were no electrical sockets. So I asked Victor to install electrical sockets on the wall, and he essentially ran wires along the baseboard, did it very tastefully. And the first thing when they came in, and there are actually 3 gentlemen who came in, is I hear bang, bang, bang. What are they doing? They're chiseling out of the wall enough space to put the electrical sockets in. They come in, they wire stuff up. Oh, by the way, they never turn the power off. This is a different way of doing things. And they were very efficient. They put the ceiling fans in, again, running wires. As I've discovered, these houses are very minimally wired. The kitchen and utility room are the only rooms with grounded circuits. Everything else is ungrounded, which is why if you have expensive electronics, you buy surge suppressors. We will, in our new refrigerator, which was just delivered, we will put a surge suppressor on it. We also had the interesting is these houses are concrete tombs. I mean, they're all concrete and brick. So the internet modem was at one far corner of the house, and say at least the Wi-Fi signals did not go very far. So I have a separate router, and I found the best place to put it was on the balcony on going up the stairs. And the interesting one, the only way to get, I actually had Victor drill a hole through the staircase so we could get a small hole so we could run an Ethernet cable up there. And he also ran some power up there. So he gets his 3-foot drill bit out and drills the hole. This is a different world. It's a different way of doing things. And you get a lot of folks who say, oh, God, this is horrible. No, it actually works pretty well. As I said, I've been having him hang the pictures. I had him rehang a TV set. The next thing I'll be doing is paying my property taxes and water bill. I think my property taxes will be for the year about 3,000 to 4,000 pesos, or about $150 to $200. My water bill, which I will pay for the year, should be something roughly equivalent. The water systems are not metered, so I pay the cost of water is based on the size of the house. And I still need to transfer the electric service into our names. I cannot do that until the deed gets transferred. And by the way, I have the same problem in Austin. I sold my house, my condo in July, and come November, I still got a property tax bill because it still hadn't been registered with the taxing authority. In the electrical service, it's very important to be in your name. Very important. What most entities are looking for is an electric bill or a telephone bill in your name. That proves that you live there. It's a real interesting. So hopefully it gives you a good idea it's kind of the same, but then it's not. And what you're buying is not the same. So with that, hopefully you've got a better idea what it's like to purchase a house in Mexico. So take a moment, if you could be so kind, to go to careerpivot.com, sign up for the weekly Career Pivot Insights newsletter, which is sent out every Sunday, and you will get a weekly update on this podcast, white papers, and new blog posts. While there, don't forget to check out the Career Pivot community, which can be found at careerpivot.com/community. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for Career Pivot on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll also find me on Twitter at Career Pivot. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the Repurpose Your Career podcast. You will find all the show notes at careerpivot.com/episode-254 and check out all the pictures there. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podbeam, Overcast, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and lots of other places where podcasts can be found. In fact, this podcast can be found on the Repurpose Your Career podcast channel on YouTube. Hope to see you next Monday for another episode of Repurpose Your Career podcast.